Hey, I'm Roland with Mobile Geeks, and what we have right here is the HTC One, and it's both generation of the new device. So basically, we have the M7 on the left and the M8, which is the 2014 edition that just got announced today in London. And we want to compare these two devices very, very quickly. I can't go into any depth things because I have to catch a flight later on, but we're probably gonna have a more in-depth comparison coming up in the next couple of days or maybe next week because we're all traveling right now. So on the left we have the well-known HTC One M7 first generation device based on a Snapdragon 600 1.7 gigahertz quad-core running a 1080p screen with 4.7-inch diagonal and boom sound. So you have the speakers on top and the bottom of the screen, capacitive touch buttons, and yeah, it's an awesome device. As we all know, it's got plenty of prices and it's been well awarded with what it definitely deserves, in my opinion. But right next to that is the second generation HTC One, and that is definitely an awesome device, and it's a well-made evolution of the first gen HTC One. Because what you get now is a Snapdragon 801 2.3 gigahertz CPU in there. In Asia, it's actually a 2.5 gigs CPU, still 2 gigs of RAM, but now we also have a 16 gigabyte edition because that's the first difference between the two devices. Apart from the size, we have a micro SD card slot right here, so you can actually extend the storage because many people have actually been criticizing HTC for leaving out the micro SD card slot on the first gen HTC One, so now they have put it in there. But let's quickly go around the hardware first. So what you get is a definitely a lot bigger phone. So it has actually grown. I think that it's about 1 centimeter or zero point 0.3 inches longer than the first gen device, and it is also a tiny bit wider. So that's probably about like 1 or 2 millimeters in the width department. Also, the weight has been growing a bit because it's bigger, right? And it has a bigger battery. So it's 160 grams on the old HTC One, on the new HTC One, and the old model is actually coming in at 143 grams, I think. That reason for that is again the battery has also grown, so this only has a 2000, I think 300 milliampere hour battery, while the new model has a 2600 milliampere hour battery. HTC is also putting in a couple of power saving features, but those are actually only going to be delivered after the launch. And if you look at the two devices side by side, you can really see that the new one has grown a lot, but that's also because of the bigger screen and again because of what HTC has done down here. So they have moved the capacitive touch buttons away from the device. They've put it on the screen, so you have the Android buttons on screen, but they still have this bar underneath the screen where you can actually only have the HTC logo, and that's basically it. What else have they done? They have improved the sound on the boom sound speakers. I can't compare that right now because there's no music on the devices, but let me promise you, you definitely get a more round and deeper sound on the new HTC One. Also, we have a 5 megapixel camera up here on the front, so that's pretty much a first for a major manufacturer doing a 5 megapixel camera on the front of a device. The old one still has a 2 megapixel camera, I think. That's a 2.1 megapixel sensor. Otherwise, the new one has gotten slightly thinner. I actually think when I had them on the table, you could actually see that it was a bit thinner. Weight hasn't changed, but when you look at the sides of the two devices, you can actually see that the new one has a full metal back, so you don't have this plastic rim that goes around the old HTC M7 or the HTC One in this case. So the new one is actually covered, 90% of the back is actually covered in metal, so that makes it feel even more slick and definitely has been a great improvement. So HTC has really been investing in its manufacturing technology to actually be able to pull this off on the new HTC One. Another thing you'll notice on top is basically you have this long plastic bar, so that's probably where they're also hiding their wireless antennas now. Also integrated again is a infrared sensor, which is infrared blaster, which is integrated into the home button or the power on and off button on the old model, and now has been probably integrated into this black bar on top. Yeah, otherwise the two devices look pretty much the same, at least from the front, but the new casing makes it look a lot or quite a bit different when you look on the sides. Another big difference is actually the camera on the back, because the old one has a 4.1 megapixel ultra pixel camera with larger pixels than other devices maybe have, but HTC has kept the same, I think it's the same 4.1 megapixel sensor on the main camera on the new HTC One, but what they've done is actually they've integrated this thing up here, which is a 2 megapixel camera working as a depth sensor, so you capture depth information in hardware. So other companies are doing this in software, but HTC is actually using its hardware to make it to make you able to set the focus point on a picture you've taken. After you've taken the picture, you can switch around and do some pretty nice effects using the bokeh effect that actually is produced by this camera set of cameras on here. And also you have now 2 LED flashes which are of different colors, so you get more realistic skin tones when you take pictures of people. Also, the new one feels even higher end than the old HTC One. The old HTC One definitely has a great feeling to it. I've been using it for a week now, preparing for this, and it really feels great, but the new one is totally in a different department. They're actually pulling things to another level, and this is definitely a nice device you might want to get. So basically, this has been my very, very quick comparison of the HTC One of the first generation and the second generation HTC One. There's also a big difference in software because we have HTC Sense 6.0 on the new one and HTC Sense 5.5 on the old one. One quick example of the differences between this is actually that HTC has integrated kind of a knock-on feature or a double tap, whatever you want to call it. You might know this from Nokia or LG. So you double tap the screen and the device should wake up from its standby, and you can quickly switch back and forth between standby and the clock or lock screen in this case. There's a couple of other gestures where you actually swipe in from the left to open blink feed, and you swipe in from the right to open the last opened app, but we'll show you these in another video. So this has been Roland with Mobile Geeks, quickly checking out the new HTC One and the old HTC One, and I'll see you around.